The last year has not been the best for competitive Pokemon play, however things are looking up. With collecting being at an all-time high and the advent of huge online tournaments, never has there been a better time to get into the Pokemon trading card game. But where to start? Enter Sealed Only Pokemon. Like many before me, such as Nim, Rebs, Fat Moose, and Let's Play Pokemon, I'm diving into a unique and fun trading card challenge. On a budget of £30 an episode, I'll be trying to build a competitive Pokemon deck to take on the PTCGO ladder and battle our way through online tournaments. The catch? I can only use sealed official products to build my deck. That means no trading, no buying singles, and no easy way out. So, with that in mind, let's crack some packs. Here we are, the big 1-0, double digits, episode 10. Luckily, to mark this occasion, we have a little something to celebrate. If you remember back in episode 7 when we qualified for the team challenge, we earned ourselves a new playmat, and it has finally arrived. We might not have Inteleon in our deck anymore, but this playmat feels really special for the series, and I'm happy that going forward we get to use this guy. Last episode we started our Players' Cup run and it did not go well. Watching back the episodes since then, I did seem quite sad that we blew out each event, but now sometime between matches, I think that we were slightly unlucky. We are always going to have a tough time against tier 1 decks, but I also think that our deck has more to give than we saw last time. So we're going to be throwing 4 more keys into the ring this episode, and hopefully we'll be able to show a few second round games this time. To improve our chances, we're going to be opening up another Blastoise V battle deck, but unfortunately our budget won't allow us to go straight into a second VMAX, so we're going to have to be a bit creative with our remaining funds this week. I could have just cracked open some battle styles, and don't get me wrong, that is on the cards for an episode soon, but for this one I thought that we'd finally open something I bought a while ago for the series, and I've never found an episode to crack it in. And that would be this Kyogre Unseen Depths theme deck. Now if that seems like a strange choice to you, let me remind you that there is one extremely useful Pokemon in this deck, in Phione, and not much else, realistically. But I think it's going to be a good addition. With our remaining budget, I thought that we'd keep up this trend of something special and try our luck with a Shining Fates mini tin. Between the Shiny Vault and the main set, there is quite a lot in here that we can use, we just kind of have to beat the odds to pull it. So that's our lot this week. Let's crack out our key cards from the theme deck and see what Shining Fates has in store for us. We swept through the list for Blastoise last time, so you probably remember there's not much else in there that we want, unfortunately, but Blastoise V is a cracker, so let's have a quick reminder of what he does. Blastoise V has 220 HP, a 1 water attack for 30, and a 3 water attack for 200 that you can't use again next turn. This obviously isn't the big hitter, it's the VMAX that we're going to be going into, and hopefully now that we have 2, there's less chance that we'll prize 1 and can't get into our VMAX. This is going to be a great little addition. Moving into our Unseen Depths deck, there just isn't anything in here that we can use that's either good or hasn't already rotated. Kyogre himself is a beauty, but we're a long way past using him now. So the only thing that's in this deck is the aforementioned Phione. Now Phione's an interesting Pokemon because it says that once during your turn, before you attack, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may have your opponent switch their active Pokemon with one of their benched Pokemon. If you do, discard all cards attached to this Pokemon and put it on the bottom of your deck. Now, obviously we don't get to pick the Pokemon that it swaps with, but it's disruptive, it means we can never deck out, and it's just a really handy tech to have in our deck. I'm excited to add him in. But that's not all, we do have these 2 packs of Shining Fates, and as I said before, there is tons in here that we can use, from Crobat to Shiny Suicune, Shiny Frostmoth. There's a lot in here, and it's just a great set to open, really. We have ourselves Nickit, Trapinch, Yanma. There is a good common Snom in this set, which will be useful if we do go into the Frostmoth line. Outside of that, I don't think there's much else. Ball Guy, Rusted Shield. No shiny Pokemon for us, but we could steal... Oh, Crobat is definitely the Pokemon we're looking for. Greedent isn't Crobat. But hey, that's a V. Like we said, there is a lot in this set, so the odds of us actually pulling what we need is slim, but I thought we'd give it a shot considering It's such a fun set to open. Gossifleur, Eevee, Nickit, Morpeko, Rowlet, Fighting Energy, Thwackey, Luxio, Rusted Sword, no shiny Pokemon, and no Crobat. Professor's Research. Nice. Unfortunately, we didn't get anything from our Shining Fates pack, but we do still have Blastoise V and Phione to add this week, so let's get them in the deck. We may have only pulled 2 new additions this week, but I took this episode to finally make a couple of consistency changes that I've been putting off. First and foremost, we have added a second Blastoise V, increasing our chances of getting the VMAX into play, as well as introducing Phione to the deck as a fun new tech. But for everything else, we've dived into the box of pulls and added 4 new cards to the deck, all with the aim of making our deck more streamlined and effective at pulling off our objectives. At this point, I'm very confident in all our Blastoises being able to do the needed damage. It's just a matter of getting them out when needed, so to that end we have upped Quick Ball, Pokecom and Dedenne by 1 copy each to really ensure that we find all the needed pieces at the right time. I've also added in a third switch, as Blastoise V and VMAX are quite big lads and needed the extra mobility. To make room for all of these, we've had to cut 6 cards, and some were easier decisions than others. Great Ball is finally out of the list, swapping for an extra Quick Ball and Pokecom. I just think that they provide much more flexibility and consistency, so that was one of the easier changes to make. In line with that, I've opted for a second Dedenne-GX, swapping out one of our Professor's Research, putting that down to 3, as Dedenne is searchable in a number of ways and can be used the same turn as the Research Marnie or Boss. The last of our quote-unquote easy changes was the Air Balloon for Switch. I just wasn't getting the full worth of Air Balloon, and not all our attackers can use it anymore, so Switch just kind of felt right. One of our last 2 changes was Phione in for Reset Stamp. They aren't exactly comparable, but I felt like we'd be getting more repeatable value during the course of a game with Phione than we were with Stamp, but I am going to keep an eye on this one. This is one of the ones I'm not too confident about. Plus I feel that Stamp has been in and out of our deck more than any other card, so we'll see how that goes. Saving the best for last, we needed space for Blastoise V, and as much as it pains me to do so, we're finally retiring Double V from the list. He just isn't hitting the numbers we need anymore, he's weak to fighting. I love the guy, but unfortunately he's going to retire to the binder. And that would be everything. 6 cards in, 6 cards out, and hopefully a few more wins on the horizon. We do have 4 more keys of Players' Cup, so let's see what Blastoise can do this week. Our first key this episode had us in what would turn out to be a very close match. Starting with a rather decent hand that allowed us to get Blastoise V into play and search out a Dedenne-GX proved that some of our new additions were indeed working as intended. At this point we had no idea what our opponent was running, but swiftly saw the Reshazard and the Cramorant V, which ended in a very quick first turn snipe onto our Dedenne. Obviously this is not ideal, but still workable in the grand scheme of things. We work on furthering our board, keeping the momentum up with a research that starts to provide us with a rather healthy bench presence. Obviously any of our single prize Pokemon are liable to being sniped by Cramorant, but without Mew in our deck we just have to get as many Squirtle out and just hope some survive. Luckily we don't see back-to-back spit shots and are allowed to set up further. I do risk using another Dedenne, hoping that I can get this Cramorant V off the board before Welder appears, but we don't find the VMAX or the extra energy, so we're left hoping not to see the Welder from our opponent this turn. Obviously this is very naive, as they always have it, and we lose our second Dedenne, leaving us very close to losing this first game. Using Mewtwo we put Marnie on top of our deck, switch Blastoise V into the active, and pull the trigger on drawing 5. Lo and behold, we find what we've been looking for and get not 1, but 2 Blastoise onto our bench. Powering up the powerful Squall, we get the KO on the bird and position ourselves to attack with Blastoise-GX should we need it next turn. Our opponent digs through their deck with both Jirachi, finding a Dedenne and filling their board in search of their last KO. With Blacephalon, our opponent does have the ability to blow up most things on our board, so it's down to us to knock him out first. Fortunately, while a lot happens, our opponent is unable to set everything up this turn and passes back to us. We don't have a whole lot of options. Our ideal play needs us to have a boss, but we can Marnie them out of any resources they built up last turn and start to spread about some damage with our fresh VMAX. Welder and Stamp from our opponent make me start to sweat as we lose the boss in hand, which would have given us the KO on Blacephalon. Luckily, we seem to be given one more turn to play, but I am starting to get nervous about our chances in this game. Still unable to take the game or the Blacephalon KO, I decide to at least make it hard for our opponent. Switching into Baby Blastoise means that we get the KO and also force our opponent to need boss for game. We see some thinning and a draw from Oranguru before Jirachi comes in huge for the win, pulling boss with Stellar Wish. The fact that they boss up my Blastoise V immediately tells me they have everything they need, and we lose in an otherwise very close matchup. You can't be too upset with that. Coming off the game with Blacephalon, I was feeling optimistic, and our start to this game with Psychic Mew 3 kept that positivity flowing. It became obvious pretty early on what we were up against, and honestly this may have been one of the first times I'd actually played against this particular Mewtwo and Mew variant. Therefore you might see me checking all of their benched attackers throughout this match to try and remember exactly what this deck can do. It seemed our opponent's attacks were relatively expensive, at least the threatening ones, and it gave us some time to fill out our bench with all of our support Pokemon. Not to mention another use of the lovely Phione to pester and annoy our opponents. Oddly, I seem to end my turn without hitting the Jirachi GX for 30, but I think that was just oversight rather than any form of tactical play. Not that it mattered, as a quick research saw the turn pass swiftly back to us. Then, in possibly one of the best Marnies of the series so far, we were provided with Blastoise VMAX, Rare Candy and Baby Blastoise. I was feeling really good at this point after taking our first two prizes from the Jirachi GX. Our opponent's Mew 3, however, were starting to look very scary, and Dedenne refilling our opponent's hand gave them plenty of options, such as the Stealthy Hood on active. Nightwatch took two cards from our hand, including the Marnie, which was less than ideal. Thankfully, we pulled another off the top and carried on with our turn as planned. Now you might be thinking, did I not consider bossing up a bench sitter to avoid the Mew 3 from attacking next turn? No, I did not. My foolish positivity failed to remind me to check the Mew 3 itself, because as you can see in a Psychic deck, Mewtwo and Mew can actually use its GX, which I am very confident I had never seen before and became well and truly tilted. I attempted to recover from this massive loss of damage by throwing my single prize Blastoise in the way, but unfortunately he merely tickled the freshly healed Mew 3 before falling like his big VMAX brother before him. Keeping hold of the research after Nightwatch did mean that our hand went from 0 to 100, putting important cards back in deck, reloading our bench, and getting another VMAX on the road to hitting some faces. It also led to an extremely awkward attempt to use Phione despite the Stealthy Hood on Mew, and honestly we just got this card, yet people are teching for us already. Back to our opponent, and it didn't feel like they had to do much to stay in the driver's seat. A few attachments and a Marnie kept their board progressing, and combined with the Nightwatch, it left us with little to no options. A bit of hindsight with the movement this turn, but had we just promoted the VMAX here, the Oranguru play might have had more impact. Instead of evolving Baby Blastoise and attacking with him, we could have gone in with a VMAX, still getting the KO, but potentially surviving next turn as well. Instead, we went down to one prize card remaining, but were nowhere near winning the game. Yet another key down. Key 3 and another round 1, however, the polar opposite start to the last match as we find ourselves with next to nothing against Single Strike Urshifu. While I'm definitely more in the Rapid Strike camp, I really do like Single Strike Urshifu, and having a chance to see how he fared up against the deck was quite interesting. Our opponent managed a rather good turn 1, getting a bear and 2 dogs in play, while we faltered slightly, not getting off to any sort of explosive start. Research didn't really help us to find anything exciting, and we're forced to end our turn on an underwhelming water gun for 30. Keeping on brand, our opponent emptied their hand and used Bruno to draw 4, finding plenty of goodies including a Dedenne for even more draw. Luckily, despite an enormous progression in their board state, there were no Houndooms and therefore no attack this turn. This meant I had a chance to get something prepared for the inevitable beatdown coming our way. Because of this pressure, I think I made a questionable play. Too scared to lose 2 rare candy, I searched out a Blastoise-GX over our own Dedenne, which seems like a very greedy play. Our opponent, after a few turns, started to use beatdown to get damage on our Blastoise V, so we switched out for the GX, hoping to get a decent sized rocket splash on the opposing VMAX. We ended our turn using the Gmax attack so as to not power up the scroll attached to Urshifu. Houndoom finally makes an appearance, but far more worrying is the boss's orders that negates all of our last turn, losing the V anyway, and 2 energy for the rocket splash with it. Definitely a case of overthinking the situation on our part, I think. I do my best to quickly build up a board that can come back from the situation, hoping that Urshifu will have to discard all their energy to take another KO and it will give me a window. So we roll energy back, we day change, we load up on Squirtle, everything I can to hopefully take back initiative should the chance arise. We also get a KO on the benched Urshifu V to really try and slow down our opponent. Marnie, however, really screws with our plans, as she always does, destroying the lovely hand we had for ourselves next turn, leaving us with a whole lot of nothing. Not to mention the loss of our Blastoise GX as we expected, but now without anything great to follow it up with. I throw down Mewtwo both to return some draw to our deck, and also as a 1-prizer stall to offer up as tribute. And sacrificed he is. With 2 doggos now on the field, Urshifu can reload their energy rather swiftly, and the game is looking lost. Our own Marnie doesn't offer us up too much, but we give Phione another shot to save the day, just praying there isn't a Switch in our opponent's hand. We all know how this story goes, however, and Switch finishes off one of the most one-sided matches of the day so far. Game 4, and it's round 1 again. Despite having never played a Psychic Mew 3 deck before this week, we face up against a second one here in this 4th key. It might seem silly, but I'm really happy with how this first turn went. I have a big problem with overextending in my early turns, and yet here I sat on Dedenne and didn't push for a more flashy turn 1, instead opting for consistency. It's the little improvements not only in the deck but my playstyle that keep me going in this series. Our opponent has quite a flashy turn 1 of their own, getting their first Mewtwo and Mew started on the bench, day changing, and filling their discard with a bunch of tech attackers. Thanks to our reserved first turn and, let's face it, a lack of Marnie from our opponent, we get a great second turn in here. Establishing our powerful school Blastoise, day changing, researching, evolving and powering up a Blastoise VMAX. For the second time this week, I can honestly say this is one of our best early game setups, and it really speaks to the consistency we're finding in the list now. We even end our turn with a powered up second Blastoise on the bench, which is not a place we find ourselves often this early in the game. The Mew 3 player continues to get attackers for their Mewtwo and Mew into the discard, as well as making sure that we don't get too ahead of ourselves by healing all damage off Jirachi GX with a Mallow and Lana. A quick peek in their discard shows a massive array of Pokemon our opponent can use, but correctly I check the Gengar and Mimikyu just as they fire off a Horror House GX, meaning that we can't play any cards from our hand next turn. Thankfully we can still use Powerful Squall and attack with Blastoise VMAX's second attack, spreading some damage around in case of more healing from our opponent. Instead they simply smash back into our VMAX for 250 damage. Without Rare Candy I simply have to get to Blastoise GX the old fashioned way, via evolving a Wartortle. I weigh up my options and decide losing the Blastoise VMAX isn't the worst thing in the world, and can even power up the last of the water in my deck on its way out. So I take the KO with him and prepare for some back-to-back KOs between our opponent and I. Strangely, nothing happens and our turn comes back around with no retaliation. He couldn't have seen the Blastoise GX coming, or he wouldn't have offered up the 3-prizer to us so readily. Nervous that I've messed up my maths, I try to maximise all the energy on the field, retreat into the Blastoise-GX, and Rocket Splash for a whopping 540 damage, and the game. A win! A single lonesome win in our Players' Cup games, I will take that. I know I said how much I wanted to show off a round 2 game, but honestly it was against ADP Station and it wasn't a loss that I really wanted to relive, so let's end on a high note. Blastoise V may not have been a flashy inclusion to the deck, and we probably didn't even notice its addition in most games, but the fact that we got Blastoise VMAX out so consistently makes me thankful it was there. Phione didn't work as well as I would like, but I'm not giving up on the little guy just yet. The card is definitely situational, but I still see its value, so next week and beyond we're going to see how it pans out. The deck, while not perfect, is really making me proud, and I have a blast playing it. Next week we're going to crack open the second Blastoise VMAX box to finish that line off, and hopefully get what we need from the Battle Styles packs while we're at it. If you guys have any ideas on what you think could really improve the deck, let me know in the comments below, because outside of Blastoise VMAX I only have 1 or 2 more things in mind, so I'm open to any and all suggestions. Obviously if you're watching this on release you'll notice that Players' Cup 4 qualifiers have well and truly ended, so despite my plans we won't be getting another episode in, however I'm going to try and do something special next week to make up for it. I have some ideas for the end of the series which I feel we are approaching, but that's a few episodes away yet, and hopefully by the time we get there the deck will be holding its own more consistently. In my head the aim was always to get to around 10 episodes, but now that we're here I'm thinking episode 14 or so will be where we wrap things up, so we do still have some chances to improve the list before the end. But until then, keep cracking packs.